Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi. Coming up in this edition, thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in all 50 US states, decrying the economic turmoil and widespread job cuts. The Israeli military has changed its initial account of the killing of 15 emergency workers near Rafah last month. And rain-triggered flooding in the capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has killed dozens of people. We begin in North America. Thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in all 50 US states, decrying the economic turmoil and widespread job cuts. Those gathering for the hands-off campaign said the new round of tariffs and efforts to downsize federal agencies are an assault on families, jobs, healthcare and social security. Popin Putin reports from Washington.
Scenes from the nation's capital as thousands of protesters descended on Washington, D.C. to participate in the hands-off campaign. In a loud and unified chorus, demonstrators called on the Trump administration to keep its hands off civil rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and more.
We object to the everything that Donald Trump is doing, basically in terms of his power grab and all the damage he's doing to the economy and to democracy. That's why I'm saying Trump's slump is basically the stock market's crashing, the economy's going to crash, it's already crashing, and it's all about Trump. It's all his actions, his stupidity.
One of my major concerns is how much disinformation that they are perpetuating out in the public, that basic science and basic facts that our democracy depends on is being torn down. And when that happens, people get hurt. We've already seen that, whether it's measles outbreaks that should not be happening in this country or climate change. I'm really concerned about it. We're going the wrong direction.
Organizations and ordinary Americans demonstrated against U.S. President Donald Trump's policies, many encompassed in over 100 executive orders, including the efforts of the Department of Government Efficiency, resulting in the firing of tens of thousands of federal workers, pulling funding from scientific and educational institutions, and levying tariffs on global trade partners, which sent financial markets into free fall. Thousands also turned out in cities across the United States, including Boston, New York, Los Angeles, and Atlanta. On Sunday, more protests were held at Tesla dealerships across the country, aimed more specifically at Trump advisor Elon Musk and his DOGE cuts to the federal government.
That was Popin Putin on opposition at home to US tariffs and job cuts. Turning to Europe, leaders on the continent have also voiced opposition to the US measures. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the bloc stands ready to defend its interests with proportionate countermeasures. Top EU officials also said they remain committed to negotiating over US tariffs. In Austria, winemakers risk a sharp revenue drop despite lower than expected duties. Johannes Pleschberger finds out how they plan to tackle the situation.
Wine grower Gerhard Lobner feared entirely losing his biggest export market. Now that US tariffs are much lower than expected, the Viennese businessman can continue shipping wine to America. He is, however, uncertain how many customers will cancel due to increased prices.
If
the Americans want to build a wall around their country and only want to drink woody Chardonnay from the Central Valley, then so be it.
Instead of the previously announced 200%, Washington ultimately decided on 20%. Nevertheless, some Austrian wine growers fear this measure will cut US orders in half, adding another existential threat after the COVID pandemic and high inflation hit local vineyards. Vienna calls itself the world's only capital with significant wine production within city limits, but continuing production with less American customers will be challenging.
If there is too much wine here in Europe, the wine growers will have really problem because the prices go really down and they have no income with this wine.
Europe exports roughly $5 billion worth of wine to the US each year. If American customers stop buying that wine because of higher prices, export revenue might drop by up to 20%. And the EU Commission wants to help wine growers adapt by unlocking new market opportunities, such as low alcohol wine, which more and more younger Europeans are choosing for health reasons. Another solution is going east. Last year, Austrian wine exports increased by 11% to countries like Japan, South Korea and China. It's a trend many Viennese wine growers hope will continue, with some already traveling to Beijing to meet potential buyers.
I do think that China is an exciting wine market. An Austrian white wine goes perfectly with Chinese cuisine.
And even if he loses some American customers, Lovna is certain his historic winery will continue to thrive, as it has done for the past 342 years, despite wars and trade wars.
That was Johannes Plescheberger reporting from Vienna. In China, the country has accused the United States of undermining global trade rules in the name of fairness. Beijing is calling the sweeping tariffs on global trading partners an act of unilateralism, protectionism, and economic coercion. Multiple Chinese chambers of commerce have denounced the new round of U.S. tariffs. These business associations from a range of sectors, including textiles, foodstuffs, machinery, and electronics, blasted Washington for violating global trade rules and harming corporate and consumer interests. Meanwhile, China has announced a 34% tariff on all U.S. imports and has banned several U.S. companies from trading and investment, while placing some others under export controls. Zhao Yunfei explains the Chinese response.
The pursuit of so-called fairness is more than just America first, but American exceptionalism. That's the stance that China has taken on U.S. sweeping tariffs against trading partners around the globe. In a statement on Saturday, Beijing said Washington's move infringes on other countries' legitimate rights, violates World Trade Organization rules, harms the rules-based multilateral trading system, and disrupts global economic stability. It also labeled U.S. tariffs as an act of unilateralism, protectionism, and economic bullying. Data from China's General Administration of Customs shows that the United States is China's third largest trading partner in the first 2 months of this year. But economic experts are worried that the tariffs could further damage bilateral trade. China announced on Friday another 34% tariff placed on all imported U.S. products. That's the same amount of additional tariffs that Trump earlier imposed on China.
China's countermeasures clearly demonstrate a zero-tolerance stance against actions that seek to undermine the global multilateral trading ecosystem. These harmful moves have far-reaching consequences for the global economy, and China's countermeasures are both well-prepared and timely.
China says it would take resolute measures to safeguard its sovereignty and interest. In Saturday's statement, Beijing reiterated China's commitment to high-level opening up and sharing development with the world. It called for global cooperation to reject protectionism and uphold the rules-based international trading system. The statement also called on the international community to value fairness and justice and stand on the right side of the history.
That was Zhao Yunfei on China hitting back at U.S. tariffs. Staying in Asia, Myanmar leader Min Aung has visited the camp headquarters of the Chinese rescue teams that offered timely help following the 7.9 magnitude earthquake. More than 3,500 people have died since the quake at the end of last month. China sent rescuers and medical professionals along with emergency relief supplies. Chen Ziyuan spoke to some of them.
It's been a collective effort on the ground. China has dispatched multiple teams to Myanmar, including national-level rescue specialists and those from non-governmental organizations.
The Ministry of Emergency Management coordinated 10 non-governmental emergency forces with a total of 145 people to participate in this rescue operation. They are standardized in terms of professional skills and equipment support and are the backbone of the non-governmental emergency force.
These teams have assisted in the efforts of rescuing 8 survivors and finding the remains of 37 deceased individuals. The Ren Rescue Union, the Shenzhen Rescue Volunteers Foundation, and the Xiamen Dawn Emergency Rescue are all present here on the ground in Myanmar. China and Myanmar have a history of cultural relations that dates back more than 1,000 years. Rescue workers view the friendship between the two nations, it's mutual.
Mandalay is a special city. It is a historical city in Myanmar. In fact, it is also the central city along the Southern Silk Road, which is an extension of the ancient Tea-Horse Road. The two peoples have been in a state of mutual benefit and mutual assistance for more than 1,000 years. So I think that our ability to come here for rescue operations and support is also a continuation of friendship between the two peoples.
Myanmar's Fire Service Department announced that its efforts would transition from rescue to recovery. Locals say they will never forget what many of these rescuers have done for them during some of Myanmar's darkest days.
That was Chen Ziyuan on the showing of solidarity between China and Myanmar. Turning to the Middle East, the Israeli military has changed its initial account of the killing of 15 emergency workers near Rafah last month, after mobile phone pictures contradicted its original version of the events. The 8 workers were buried in a shallow grave in Gaza, where officials from the UN and a Palestinian Red Crescent found their bodies a week later. Israel says some of the paramedics shot dead were linked to Hamas, but it has provided no evidence. Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
I'm not sure, Paul, we will see an independent inquiry, but the army did say that it will re-examine the evidence. The fact that the army initially, in its first investigation, claimed that this convoy was traveling without any lights, therefore leading the soldiers to think that it was a convoy carrying militants. But the newly released videos showed that this convoy was traveling with emergency lights, and therefore the army will have to re-examine whatever it said, because there are certain findings which are simply not true. This is one of them. The army is still insisting that out of those 15 people, 6 were militants, and this was an old practice used by Hamas to use ambulances and emergency vehicles to move militants from one place to another, and the soldiers who were nearby were fearing exactly that. And having said that, there are 15 medics killed. Even if 6 were militants, as the Israeli army claims, 9 of them were not, and yet they were killed. Therefore, this is something that the army will have to inspect. The army still insists there were no executions whatsoever, and that the bodies were covered, not tied, but covered simply to prevent them from being eaten by animals, by dogs or rhinos or foxes running in the area. But there are clearly differences between what the army said at the beginning and the evidence that is surfacing now. The IDF said that it will examine that. Will it be enough for international bodies? I'm not so sure.
That was Jonathan Regev reporting. Israeli military operations have destroyed 90% of homes in southern Gaza's Rafah city. The international committees of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent have warned of health crisis in Gaza, saying the suspension of humanitarian aid has led to an acute shortage of medical supplies. Hospital staff members are overwhelmed by the surge in casualties as Israeli attacks intensify. Nadra Al-Tibi has more from Gaza City.
The situation inside Gaza's hospitals is spiraling into catastrophe. At the Pepest Hospital in Gaza City, doctors say they can no longer cope with the rising number of wounded patients pouring in from daily Israeli strikes. The Pepest Hospital has become the main center for hundreds of wounded Palestinians in Gaza City. The influx has overwhelmed every corner of the facility.
Each airstrike on high-rise buildings or residential areas brings hundreds of casualties. No hospital in Gaza can handle such numbers.
Amid the crisis, not only trauma patients but also chronically ill individuals are unable to access basic medical treatment. Doctors warn lives are being lost not only to bombs but to the absence of essential care.
My brother has been here for 20 days. He needs spinal surgery, but nothing has happened. He's in constant pain as the painkillers aren't working anymore.
Since early March, the health sector in Gaza has further deteriorated. Israel's continued blockade on humanitarian aid has deprived Gaza of vital medicines and equipment, pushing hospitals toward total collapse.
The high number of injuries has led to massive consumption of medicines and supplies. With border crossings closed, we can't replenish stock, and this severe shortage is threatening the health of patients and the wounded.
So far, 34 hospitals and 80 health centers have been forced out of service. Israel has targeted more than 160 healthcare facilities and 136 ambulances since October 2023. Dozens of medical staff have been killed, injured, or detained.
Gaza's healthcare system is under immense strain amid a relentless influx of wounded civilians. As Israel continues to launch attacks across the Gaza Strip, emergency medical services have also been crippled by the ongoing closure of border crossing.
That was Nado Al-Tibi reporting from Gaza City. Finally, in Africa, the rain-triggered flooding in the capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has killed dozens of people. Officials say the number of deaths is likely to rise. Many victims either drowned or were killed by collapsed walls. The city has been brought to a standstill with the roads and power cut. Chris Okumrenga has more from Kinshasa.
We're still going with the earlier figure that was reported by the provincial health minister of 30 people dead, but we have been told that there are many other people who were injured because the heavy rains poured on Friday night. Some people were sleeping in their houses, and so there was a lot of devastation on the outskirts of Kinshasa, an area known as Debonom, which leads to the airport. Many police officers and soldiers are there trying to search for people who have been reported missing and trying to help families get their loved ones. So it's a very sad day for people, residents around Kinshasa. Many people were very unprepared for these rains, and there are many houses built on low-lying areas on the outskirts of Kinshasa. In fact, the governor of Kinshasa was saying that part of the cause of this was because many people have built in unplanned settlements. And he was saying that they will, after this tragedy, they are going to try and relocate some of those people from that area. Kinshasa is an area that has a lot of sandy soils. Some of these houses that have been built in areas that are not very solid, and that is why so many people have died. And this is not the first time it's happening. In 2022, there was another heavy rainfall that triggered floods that killed more than 100 people. The authorities say they're going to take measures to ensure that this doesn't happen again. But here we are seeing another tragedy, and so the authorities are also going to see what they can do this time round. Many people are hoping that they will come up with measures that will bring this kind of tragedies to an end.
That was Chris Okumrenga reporting. Now, recapping the headlines before we go, thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in all 50 US states, decrying the economic turmoil and widespread job cuts. The Israeli military has changed its initial account of the killing of 15 emergency workers in southern Gaza last month. And rain-triggered flooding in the capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has killed dozens of people. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.